Did you hear it? Can you tell what it was? Of course you could. That's a Mustang. The Ford Mustang is not just the crown jewel in Ford's fleet. It's one of the most important automobiles ever made. Of the muscle-era cars of the 60s and 70s, the Mustang is the only one to remain in continuous production since its creation, with now more than 60 model years. In an era where crossovers, SUVs, and trucks have taken over, the Mustang is the only car still in Ford's lineup here in the United States. And for good reason. There have been more than 10 million Mustangs sold. For some, it's the only car they'll buy and the only car they'll ever own. Sure, there have been ups and downs throughout those 60 years, but every one of them has a fascinating story to tell. One chapter at a time. Welcome to the first episode in a 7-part series on the Ford Mustang. In today's episode, let's go back to where it started, before the Mustang was even called a Mustang, and discuss its development history, the first generation's key features, and its legacy today. I'm Rick Pierce, a car nerd that loves history and wants to share some car history nerdery. Welcome to our series on the Ford Mustang. Welcome to Make and Model.
We know that only combined, coordinated, cooperative effort will suffice if we are to meet the high standards of success that we have set for ourselves.
This is Henry Ford II, president of Ford Motor Company. And today, November 19th, 1956, he's announcing Ford's next big thing, Edsel. Edsel, named after Henry Ford II's father, Edsel Ford, was a bold new car lineup designed from the ground up as the car of the future. A mid-market offering, it was built to take on Buick and Dodge and cost over $250 million in development and production. That's equivalent to $2.9 billion today. The styling was, let's say, problematic, and the engineering wasn't nearly as all new as Ford claimed. When Edsel started hitting showroom floors in 1957, they were soundly rejected by the American public. It was a flop and quietly discontinued. Ford had reservations going into the Edsel project. Coming out of it in 1959 with his reservations now confirmed, he was wary of taking a chance ever again. While Edsel was failing, Ford was thriving thanks to the 56 for 56 campaign, a sales stunt to offer 1956 Fords for just $56 down. The campaign was the brainchild of a regional sales manager from Philadelphia named Lee Iacocca, Lee to his friends, and to future history books. Ford brought Lee Iacocca to their Dearborn headquarters and offered him a job managing Ford's marketing and sales. By 1960, he'd be named vice president and general manager of the Ford division, which meant that he was now in charge of future vehicle development. He quickly got to work. Hey, real quick, hit the like button. It really helps. And if you're enjoying this, maybe consider subscribing to tell YouTube you want more content like this in your life. Thanks all. Knowing that Henry Ford II wouldn't greenlight proposals for new types of cars, but also looking at all these baby boomers who were just starting to get their licenses and realizing this cohort was about to become the largest spending cohort in American history, Iacocca knew a new car had to be made. It had to be cheap. Those baby boomers were going to be just starting their careers and families and didn't have a lot to spend. But it also had to be sporty. The Ford Falcon met the first requirement of a cheap car, but it wasn't very sporty, and it wasn't appealing to young buyers. A cheap, sporty car? It's not the kind of thing that would be developed today either. But Iacocca trusted his instincts. The plan was simple. He'd put together a team of Ford's upper management to work on the special Falcon project in secret. People he knew wouldn't reveal his plans to C-suites, especially not Ford himself. Thus was born the Fairlane Group in 1961, named after the Fairlane Inn, where they met in secret to quietly develop the project. They shared a common goal: to develop the most important car Ford would ever make. By 1962, the T5 project had its framework in place. It would be developed using the Ford Falcon as a platform to save on costs, both engineering and material, and be ready as a 1964.5 model, hitting showroom floors in April 1964. What they really needed was something to drum up public opinion while they worked on the production model. The Fairlane Group brought in Joe Oros, designer of the Ford Thunderbird, to create a new mid-engine concept that they could show off. They provided him with a list of dimensions for the project and a goal to make it as interesting as possible. He got to work, creating an open-topped, aluminum-clad roadster with an integrated roll bar in just 100 days. Along each side was a prominent air intake and a badge with a horse in mid-stride against a red, white, and blue shield. They called it the Mustang. The Ford Mustang made its first public debut at Watkins Glen on October 7, 1962, leading the racers of the United States Grand Prix to open that year's event. It was white with blue racing stripes. Between events, Formula One driver Dan Gurney hopped behind the wheel of the Mustang and took it out on the course, reaching speeds up to 120 miles per hour and wowing fans in attendance. It got the rumor mill churning. Everyone wanted to know more about the Mustang. Motor Trend reported that Ford was developing a car to compete with the Corvette. Iacocca was delighted. This was exactly the publicity stunt he had hoped for. Being developed alongside the Roadster was the production version of the car, called the XT Bird originally, and what the Fairlane Group was now calling the Special Falcon. To bubble up the very best ideas, Iacocca decided to have a little competition. He brought together 7 design teams at Ford to submit proposals for the Special Falcon. He gave them the platform they had to work with and their goal: a full-scale clay model that could be produced, not a concept sketch. Then he said they had just 3 weeks to finish. The Advanced Product Studio team, a production firm that worked with Ford, submitted 13 proposals under the codename Allegro. All were incredible. While none were chosen, one of these submissions lived on and would eventually become the Ford Allegro. The Lincoln Mercury team submitted 2 options, and the combined Ford team, just 1. Yeah, that's the one that won. The Ford team had begun working on several designs, but Gail Halderman's sketch was so eye-catching, they decided to put all their effort behind a single submission. With the design chosen, Iacocca finally tells Ford about the secret project, presenting him with the winning concept in full scale so he can see its potential with his own eyes. And it worked. Ford approved the Special Falcon project in July 1962, but he only gives Iacocca $45 million of the $75 million that Iacocca asked for. With approval, though, they still needed a name. Halderman called his winning design the Cougar, and it featured a cougar emblem on the grille. But the marketing team's suggestion was to name it the Torino. Ford suggested calling it the Thunderbird 2. Iacocca decided to put the name in front of a focus group to see what the public's reaction would be. Added at the last minute by Ford market research manager Robert Eggert was the name Mustang. Eggert was a breeder of quarter horses, and his wife had given him a book called Mustangs for his birthday. The name stuck with him. Executive stylist John Nager, now head of the project's design, liked the name Mustang because he was a fan of the P-51 Mustang fighter. The focus groups liked it too. Mustang won handily, and the Special Falcon was officially given the name Ford Mustang. Knowing they'd need to replace the Cougar badge on the front of the car, Phil Clark on the design team came up with a galloping pony in mid-stride, its mane and tail billowing in the wind. The pony badge ended up on the Mustang Roadster prototype before its debut at Watkins Glen. The iconic image stuck with fans and has become one of the best-known automotive badges of all time. The Mustang still had another several months of development ahead of it, and Iacocca knew that the public's interest needed to be maintained until the Mustang could find its way into their driveways. Iacocca had Nager come up with a new concept version of the Mustang they called the Mustang II, retroactively naming the Mustang Roadster the Mustang 1. But the Mustang II was entirely for show, taking the production Mustang and combining it with sleeker elements of the original Mustang 1. And just like the year before, they rolled it out at Watkins Glen ahead of the US Grand Prix, where it continued to drum up interest in the upcoming Mustang. On March 9, 1964, the first production Mustang rolled off the assembly line. The press and public were eager to know when they could buy it. Henry Ford II revealed the Mustang to the public at the 1964 World's Fair in Flushing Meadows, New York, showcasing the vehicle at the Wonder Rotunda. Visitors to the fair had the opportunity to ride in a convertible Mustang, among some other Ford convertibles, as it was pulled along the Magic Skyway, a 12-minute dark ride designed by Walt Disney and WED Enterprises that depicted the Earth through different eras over millions of years. Disney described the ride as a fantasy land of the past, present, and future. At the end of the ride, visitors were treated to a showcase of Ford concept vehicles being developed, including the Allegro and Cougar. Also included was another showcase of the new 1965 Mustang. Public interest in the Mustang was at a fever pitch. Internal memos described extremely favorable public acceptance of the Mustang, and Ford increased its first-year forecast from 100,000 units to 240,000 units. But Iacocca wanted to push that fever pitch over the top. On April 16th, the day before the Mustang would be offered for sale in dealerships, a minute-long ad ran at exactly 9:30 p.m. simultaneously across each of the 3 television networks, ensuring that anyone watching would see the ad. The primetime spot featured shots of the car at the World's Fair being ogled by young couples and cutting through the California canyons with the promise you could test drive it right now at your local Ford dealer. What happened the next day around the country is still being talked about. But before we get into the Mustang's release, let's take a look at its features in the breakdown.
Hey, the breakdown!
The 1965 to 1968 model year Ford Mustang, the first half of the first generation of Mustangs, was a front-engine, rear-wheel drive FR pony car that came in 3 two-door, 4-seat 2+2 body styles. A soft-top convertible, a notchback coupe, and a fastback coupe. The 1965 and 1966 models were 101.6 inches long and 68.2 inches wide. The 1967 and 1968 models grew in size and were 2 inches longer and 2.7 inches wider. Likewise, an original base model Mustang was approximately 2,500 pounds, but the 67 and 68 models increased to approximately 2,800 pounds due to the larger size and added weight from safety and emissions equipment. This would be a trend that continued, but that's a topic for episode 2. The first hallmark trait to quickly identify a first-generation Mustang is the long horizontal grille flanked by lights with the galloping pony badge in the center. The pony emblem is unique to the Mustang, appearing on almost every model year throughout its history. The Ford seems to be expanding the Mustang lineup to act as a sub-brand, and the galloping pony does now also appear on the Mach-E. Other prominent characteristics are the pronounced side scoops down the sides and the rear fender hump imitating a horse's hip. The tri-bar taillights at the back are a signature Mustang trait, with the taillights flanking a gas cap in the center. On fastback Mustangs, the B and C pillar are somewhat combined, creating what's called a sail panel. Inside, the dashboard's hooded ridges divide the interior into two equal halves. All 1965 to 1968 Mustangs were built and assembled in either Dearborn, Michigan, or in San Jose, California. And when launched, the Mustang had a starting cost of $2,368, equivalent to $24,340 today. It was marketed toward young adults without a lot of disposable income who wanted a sporty lifestyle automobile. There were a number of engines offered in the first 4 model years, typically identified by the VIN's engine letter code. They were the 170 Special 6, a U-coated 170 cubic inch 2.8-liter inline 6 that was a variation of the 144 Falcon 6, producing 101 horsepower. It was only used in Mustangs produced from March to July 1964. The 200 Thrift Power 6, a T-coated 200 cubic inch 3.3-liter inline 6 that was used as the base model power plant from August 1964 onward, replacing the U-code 170. It generated 120 horsepower, a 19% increase in power. The 260 Challenger, an F-coated 260 cubic inch 4.3-liter small block V8 used in early 1965 Mustangs that produced 164 horsepower. The 298 Challenger replaced the 260 in August 1964. It was a 289 cubic inch 4.7-liter small block V8 that had several variations. The C-code 289 produced 200 horsepower. The D-code 289 produced 210. And the A-code 289 produced 225 horsepower after the standard 2-barrel carburetor was replaced with a 4-barrel setup. The last 289 is the K-code, also called the Challenger Hypo, for high power, though it was also referred to as the Cobra V8 in some official literature, and was an optional engine upgrade that increased compression and used stronger materials. It upped the power to 271 horses. In 1968, the 289 was replaced by the 302 Windsor, a 302 cubic inch 4.9-liter small block V8 that produced 230 horsepower. The 390 FE V8 was the most common Ford FE engine ever made, and the Mustang had two, a 2-valve and a 4-valve option. The 392 valve produced 270 horsepower, and the 394 valve produced 335. The 390 was a 390 cubic inch 6.4-liter V8 and often cited as giving early Mustangs their iconic sound. Lastly, also introduced in 1968 with the 302, was the 428 cobra-jet, a 428 cubic inch, 7-liter big block V8 producing 335 horsepower and 440 feet-pound of torque that is one of Ford's most famous engines. We'll discuss it a little more later in the video. Despite being VIN-coded as 1965 model year vehicles, Mustangs manufactured in 1964 between March and August are considered 1964 and a halves. 64 and a halves only came in either a coupe or convertible, as the fastback wouldn't be available until September 1964. However, at least one pre-production fastback was on display at the World's Fair in April. The 1965's updates were pretty subtle, with the biggest changes being under the hood in the form of the revised T, C, and A coded engines, and the generator replaced with an alternator. Looking at the dash is the easiest way to tell, as the light labeled Gen on 64 and a halves was replaced with Alt as a result. But some 1965 models have backup lights, and some don't, so be careful. The last thing to look for on 65s is the honeycomb grille. In 1966, the side scoops had 3 chrome ornaments added, making them quick to identify, as well as removal of the bars radiating from the corralled pony emblem. The grille was also changed to a brick pattern behind the galloping pony. The gas cap was also redesigned, with a raised Mustang emblem in the center. Inside, the dashboard was changed from the old Ford Falcon parts bin instrument cluster to new 212 cockpit-style gauges. Starting in 1967, things started to get bigger. As mentioned earlier, the length and width increased by more than 2 inches each, and the rear end was redesigned to have a concave shape, including the tri-bar taillights. The side scoops were drastically changed to have widened twin inlets, and the grille was changed again to a rectangular pattern. The radiating horizontal and vertical bars were added back, but shorter than before. Inside the 67, the dashboard gauges were changed one more time, going for a 3/2 style layout. Lastly, for 1968, the side scoops were changed again, this time to a simplified single slot design. The horizontal and vertical bars were removed again as well, and the pony emblem was decreased in size. A second corral running around the outer edge of the grille was added. Additionally, the Ford lettering on the hood was removed, and new side markers on the front and rear fenders were added to comply with new safety regulations. The 7-liter cobra-jet V8 was introduced, and the 302 Windsor replaced the 289, which leads us to the 289 package added the K-Code Challenger Hypo V8, along with front disc brakes and power steering. 289 cars can be quickly identified by the 289 badges on the front fenders, but these are popular mods to add to non-K-coded 289 cubic inch Mustangs as well. The 289 could be combined with the GT package to create the Mustang GT, a performance-focused version of the Mustang that added dual exhaust, fog lights to the front grille, a louvered sail panel on fastbacks, and GT badging on the sides. Carroll Shelby had become quite involved with Ford by 1965, working with the company on what would become a 1-2-3 finish at Le Mans in 1966 with the GT40. It's no surprise he became interested in taking the Mustang and giving it his own touch. The Shelby GT350 was a high-performance modification of the Mustang, with a Cobra high-rise engine producing 306 horsepower and equipped with larger brakes, front and rear. GT350s can be quickly identified by their distinctive GT350 side markings and stripes, and the twin Le Mans racing stripes down the center of the car over a massive, new functional hood scoop. On the front grille is an off-center galloping pony badge. Not all GT350s had racing stripes, but it turned out to be a popular option, and most that didn't originally have them have had them added since production. But the GT350 wasn't the only Shelby Mustang. Introduced in 1967 was the GT500, the ultimate first-generation Mustang. GT500s employed the 427 Cobra Le Mans V8, generating a reported 355 horses. Keep in mind there are some subtleties and nuances to the Shelby GT350s and GT500s that I'm glossing over for the sake of time. In reality, these two incredible cars could be their own whole video. Let me know if you'd like to see that video in the future by telling me in the comments. The last special edition to talk about is the 68 California Special, also known as the GTCS because of its unique side stripes. A total of 4,200 were produced and only sold in California. The 250 GTCSs ended up in Denver as the High Country Special. They featured a custom fiberglass hood, hood pins, a badgeless grille with rectangular fog lights, and Thunderbird taillights. GTCSs are among the rarest Mustangs ever produced. Americans, wowed by sleek prototypes, dazzled by World's Fair showcases alongside dinosaurs, and frenzied commercials promising test drives, rushed dealerships on April 17th. 22,000 Mustangs sold the first month. Wait, that's not right. 22,000 Mustangs sold the first day. There were lines out the doors. Police had to be called for crowd control at dealerships. Customers in Garland, Texas got into a 15-way bidding war for the keys to a Mustang, and the winner slept in the car overnight to ensure it wouldn't be sold out from under him until his check cleared. The Mustang, alongside Lee Iacocca himself, made the cover of both Time and Newsweek simultaneously. America officially had Mustang madness. The new Mustang made a big splash in September when it appeared in the James Bond film Goldfinger, being driven by actress Tilly Masterson in a car chase through the Swiss Alps. For many, it was the very first time they even got to look at the car up close. And here it was, going toe-to-toe with an Aston Martin being driven by the world's best spy. And frankly, outperforming the DB5 in many ways, up until James Bond played dirty. It became Ford's most successful sales launch since the Model A, and went on to sell 400,000 units its first year, far outperforming expected figures. Within 2 years, that number hit 2 million. Yeah, you could say Iacocca was pleased. But as the saying goes, success breeds imitation and competition. Other manufacturers began to release their own pony cars, a term for sporty muscle cars and named after the Mustang itself. Chevrolet was the first with the 1966 Camaro. Then came the AMC Javelin in 1967, and the Dodge Challenger in 1970, though Chrysler had turned the second-generation Barracuda into a pony car before that in 1967. Even one of my favorite models, the Toyota Celica, began life imitating the Mustang, as both a notchback coupe and a fastback with vertical bar taillights. It's not surprising that the Mustang's design was so heavily imitated. It won both the Tiffany Gold Medal for Design Excellence and the Industrial Designers Institute Bronze Medal, their highest award. And those aren't automotive awards. Those were industrial design awards across industries. The expanding pony car market meant that there was room for the Cougar, and it found new life when it became its own classier version of the Mustang sold under the Mercury brand. All of the success Ford Motors was seeing translated into career wins for Iacocca, and in 1967, he was promoted to executive vice president. Even knowing where Iacocca's career at Ford would end up, which we'll discuss in episode 3 of this series, it would have been hard for Ford to argue against his promotion at the time. In 1967, the world was Iacocca's. It's hard to overstate the cultural impact the original Ford Mustang had. The Mustang has become quintessentially American, appearing in movies, TV shows, video games, music videos, 4th of July parades, homecoming processions, weddings, in American-themed jigsaw puzzles, at car shows, and hooning at the local track now for about as long as any of us can remember. Hell, as I record this, I'm wearing a t-shirt with the classic Tri-Bar pony badge on it that I picked up at Kohl's years ago. It's one of my favorite shirts. And did I mention the movies? It's hard to pick the most famous Mustang on film, but if forced to choose, I'd choose Eleanor from Gone in 60 Seconds. The original Eleanor in the 1974 film is a 73 Mustang, but I think the 1967 Eleanor from the 2000 remake is arguably more famous. Despite always being a popular car, Eleanor catapulted the Mustang back into the public eye in a big way, popularizing billet grills, hood pins, and morally justified Grand Theft Auto. Do the post-2000 GTA games owe some of their success to a 1967 Mustang fastback? Maybe. In fact, Gone in 60 Seconds really set the stage for the growing resurgence of car culture in America, and films like The Fast and the Furious a year later. Honorable mention here is obviously Steve McQueen's Highland Green 68 fastback from Bullitt that gets beat to hell in what many consider the best car chase ever put to film. The Mustang is a classic, and not because Ford sold a bunch of them. It's a classic because it's been raced, and it's been modded, and it's been idolized. It's a classic because it's been loved. Everyone seems to have a story about a Mustang in their lives. For me, it was the first car I fell in love with, driving my parents crazy as I pointed Mustangs out when they drive by. I'd stay up on summer nights with the window open beside my bed, listening to the cars in the distance revving their engines. There, did you hear it? You can always tell a Ford Mustang. The story of the first generation Mustang isn't over yet. The 1969 model year is one of the most sought after Mustangs, and the 1973, it's one of the least. As the 1960s gave way to the 70s, Ford was faced with some big dilemmas, having to balance performance and power as competition heated up, and safety regulations as the government began to crack down. And by the end of it, miles per gallon ratings. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me for this first episode in my new series on the Ford Mustang. It really is one of my favorite cars, and I'm super excited to go through each generation to tell its story. This is going to be a fun series. If there's a car you think I should cover in a future video, let me know. As always, hitting subscribe would be greatly appreciated. That way you'll see when I release my next video, and hitting the bell will let you know as soon as it's released. Many thanks to my Patreon patrons and channel members, whose names you see on the screen. They support me working towards doing this full time, and I really just can't say thanks enough for that. If you'd like to support the channel but can't donate, Patreon has a free tier that you can sign up for, and then you'll be included in the credits too. To my paid patrons, founding member stickers are finally printed and should be ready to go out soon, if not already by the time you see this video. These stickers are for my first 100 paid patrons, so if you want one, there are still some available. After that, they're gone forever. This is the end of the video. If you made it this far, throw a horse emoji in the comments to really confuse the people that didn't and let me know that you were here. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time.